Welcome back for another week of the Tech Ed Podcast. You know, it's not so often on our podcast that we have a guest, somebody whose company is so well known in the world of industry, and we'll talk about that, so well known in the world of education. His name is Dave Lambert, and Mr. Lambert is the group president for ITW Welding, better known to most of our listeners as Miller Electric. Dave, we're really, really honored that you took the time to come in and talk with us today.
Thanks so much, Matt. I'm looking forward to the conversation. It is exciting to have you right in my backyard here.
Yep.
Near our headquarters in Appleton, Wisconsin, and near some of our technical offices down here in Milwaukee.
Got tremendous respect for the Miller Electric brand, not just here in Wisconsin, and you're really an iconic brand in Wisconsin, but across the country and around the globe. You know, give us kind of the 30,000-foot overview of the welding industry. What's going on? You know, what's the state of the state, if you will?
Sure. Yeah, I think in general, Matt, the exciting time in the welding industry, and the future is really very bright in the welding industry. If you think about here in North America, maybe in particular, some of the onshoring and nearshoring activity that is very real and happening over the last 18 to 24 months, for example, gives us a great sense for some of the long-term demand, cycle that would be here. And then, certainly technology advancements in our space is moving at a pace that I'm not sure we've ever seen before. And what's exciting about that is it gives us as a manufacturer an opportunity to really leverage that technology to solve customers' needs in some pretty fun and unique ways. No doubt today, given where we're at in the business cycle, we live in a cyclical world. I think, certainly coming out of the pandemic, our maybe more consumer, level customers demand there has moderated given inflation, things that are happening.
Right.
And I would say industrial customer base, both demand and backlogs have moderated some, as well as, of course, we find ourselves in an election cycle and some other changes there. But that said, pipeline is still solid. And I think the pipeline is solid primarily because the overarching kind of challenge that exists in our space remains the lack of skilled labor.
Right.
So really manufacturers and welding fabricators of all sizes are still looking for efficiencies because they can't find, the people that they need.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned a couple of really interesting things there. One of which that I don't hear so much in kind of the general media is, and I'm hearing it from a number of different manufacturing contacts, and I'm on manufacturing boards and nonprofit boards. I know you do a lot of that kind of work as well, and so you start to pick up on some of this stuff. There is a little bit of a softening in the manufacturing economy, but that hasn't changed the incredible need for skilled labor, to your point. And I know we're gonna get into that in detail.
Yeah, I think it's maybe eased the pressure a little bit in the near term, but the underlying challenge is not going away,
right?
And that pressure will be back. Absolutely. I think what's unique about this time, when there is maybe a collective breath in the market, it actually gives some of our customers the time they need to evaluate some of the new innovation that we brought,
right? So
that they can, when the time is right for them, make investments in hit a pressure release valve of their own with some of that technology.
Yeah, and I think it puts a little bit of, using the word pressure, a little pressure on the workforce as well. When manufacturers were desperate for labor, and it really, you were desperate. You would take anybody that would walk in the door just because you needed somebody working in your plant. And now we're getting to a point where I think there is going to be even more focus on the importance of skills, and that employees will be able to be a little more discerning, employers will, in terms of who they bring on the team, which really points to the importance of some of these reskilling and upskilling efforts that I know we're going to talk about as we go on with the discussion today, Dave. But before we get into that, I'd love to touch just a little bit on Miller Electric. I know the company well. I'm a lifelong Wisconsinite. Your brand is iconic here. It's iconic around the globe. But just for our listeners that, maybe recognize that in the same way of, the agriculture world, things might be green, they might be red, they might be another, there's certainly that brand loyalty in the world of welding as well. So let's just talk about the brand. Talk about the reputation, maybe what makes Miller Electric unique among other brands in the welding space.
Yeah, Miller Electric, the power of blue,
right?
As we've known it for a long time.
You bet.
Certainly, I would say first, near and dear to my heart. I grew up 20 minutes away, from Miller.
That's awesome.
And
now you're president.
And now you're president.
Yeah.
And I'll share a story in a moment, just kind of a fun personal connection in terms of how that came together. But so you think about this company, Miller Electric is in his 95th year.
Yeah.
here in 2024.
Amazing.
So 1929, Nels Miller started the company,
Yeah.
In his garage.
Right.
And I think what I've come to appreciate about this company, and as we have customers back into our facilities in Appleton, they walk away every time feeling a different culture. They feel the culture of the organization quite tangibly from our people. Nels was an individual who was a working man himself, who valued the contributions of all of his team and was highly engaged in the community. When I look at the footprint really that Nels left for our organization, now over 30 years with Illinois Toolworks,
Right.
For decades we've had an active culture of employee involvement,
Okay.
where the people that are working on the shop floor, working in the office, need to help us run this successful North American manufacturing
Sure.
organization, right? They know better than anyone how to improve productivity, how to make their workspaces safe, and how to improve quality, quite frankly, in our products. And we engage them, reward them, and they are passionate about what they do. I think the other thing that Nels really imprinted on the organization is the relationship that we have within the community. In Appleton, Wisconsin, Miller is one of the larger employers,
For
now
sure.
1,600 passionate employees strong. And, proudly, I would say for many years running, the number 2 supporter of the United Way campaign on an annual basis. Last year, $1.4 million into the local community between employee contributions and company match. And I think 13 years running now, the number 1 provider of junior achievement volunteers.
Amazing.
And it's just part of the fabric and
For
passion that has gone into now the innovations and the continued innovation that has kept Miller strong and vibrant, because we want to solve real challenges in an innovative way, and our people are passionate about that. And the relationships we have in the community, the relationships we have with the customers come through in a really strong way.
And there really is an energy around what you're doing, and the reputation in the community, and what we call the Fox Valley here in Wisconsin is just you're making a huge mark. I do have this question for you. You think about 30 years into this, this financial relationship with ITW, with Illinois Toolworks, to maintain that culture for 30 years, that family culture, going back to the founder, employee engagement, community involvement. Is there a trick or a secret to that? What would you tell people who are trying to maintain that through a transaction like that now, some 30 years later?
It's a great question, Matt. And I think, the answer I would give you would be look at ITW's business model, right? Customer-backed innovation is about 80-20, which is about simplification.
Yep.
And culture is the third leg of that powerful business model.
Yep.
And from a cultural perspective within our organization, we are a decentralized organization that values humble leadership, that allows us to push decision-making down to the lowest level in the organization. If you look at the value set of the company, integrity, respect, trust, simplicity, those types of things for us are more than just words on a wall. It is really, truly, how we engage our team. If I think about the Miller family, that sold the company, I think they would be really proud
For sure.
to see that they sold to a large organization. Make no mistake about it. We're not family held any longer.
Right.
But that truly does value the input, of our people. We operate with a what, why, how leadership model. And the how is all about engaging our teams closest to the action that are ultimately going to know best how to execute any strategy.
So you've got this culture that has survived, and one of the things that you mentioned both in answers to both of the last 2 questions is this culture and the spirit of innovation. I think the words that you used were strong and vibrant in terms of the culture of innovation and continuing to grow in the technology space. So would love for you to talk a little bit, for people that aren't embedded right in the world of welding, maybe they think, well, you've got a power source, you've got a weld booth. What, how complicated can that be? In this age of Industry 4.0 and the age of advanced manufacturing, AI as it applies to advancing manufacturing technology. Talk a little bit about, Dave, how how you innovate in that age and how some of these trends in manufacturing technology have an impact on your products.
I mean, first and foremost, we are not a company that seeks to, let's say, create a solution to a problem that we hope exists in the future.
Right.
We're very much grounded in understanding the needs of our customers today, and then using technology, some that maybe we develop ourselves, some that we maybe take off a shelf, combined with our technology and bring a novel solution into the marketplace. Sure. Right. So that is the work of our product management teams and our engineering teams, is to be close enough to the customer to be able to bring a solution that they will value. I think we think about welding and Industry 4.0 things of that nature. Matt, there is so much that goes into the visible welding arc that we see, right? And yet today, the volumes of data that's available behind the scenes to make good decisions.
Interesting.
I found it interesting. I think back to just a few years ago, coming out of the pandemic, and some of the microprocessor shortages that were there, given the global supply chain challenges. And at that time, all of the attention was on the automotive industry, right? Assembly lines were shut down because they didn't have enough microchips to be able to assemble the products.
Cars sitting in lots.
Cars sitting in line. We're in the background. Us welding manufacturers today use, as many as 5 or 6 microprocessors to control, influence, and manipulate the arc.
Interesting.
So we're harnessing data. We're serving data up to customers around the globe about their welding operations, right? We're monitoring weld sequencing, weld parameters for quality. We're doing so much with data today that I think this is not your granddaddy's weld shop any longer.
Yep.
And those types of technologies just allow us to bring much more novel solutions to our customers.
And when you think about the granddaddy's weld shop, I think a lot of folks maybe have that image of, I spent a lot of time in metal fabrication. Ran a metal fabrication operation for about 6 or 7 years, had a whole team of phenomenally talented welders on our team in that business. But the perception a lot of times of metal fabrication, of working in a weld shop, was kind of your granddaddy's weld shop, right? Maybe a little bit dirty. You're walking out of there with dust all over yourself, and not particularly super polished environment. Talk to us a little bit about, number one, how that perception is changing. Is it changing the way that it should be? Should it change? Is welding different? And then, in terms of the workforce, if you're counseling a young person who's considering what's out in front of them, why should they consider welding as a career choice?
I like to think about those opportunities, even the welding environment in different weld shops. There's, like so many things, there's probably a bell curve of adoption in terms of, there's no question in my mind that your granddaddy's workshop still exists, right? In some places in the marketplace, right?
No doubt.
And then on the other side, there are manufacturers where welding is a significant portion of their operation, and they've made investments to provide for a clean environment for their welders, a positive environment for their welders, that I think allows their welders, quite frankly, to do some of their best work.
Right.
Right. So, why should someone think about a career in the welding industry? And I think you think about welding and what I maybe know, what you know about welding, it touches so many parts of our lives, and yet many don't understand it.
Right. Most don't.
I think as a welding operator, what's exciting is you have an opportunity to perhaps manufacture product that could save lives, that certainly supports commerce in some capacity, and quite literally is building the world around us. And I think what draws many people into welding to start with is the desire to be able to work with their hands, right? Bring their craftsmanship, their creativity to the work every day.
Totally.
And that's as a starting point. And I'll maybe offer a story of a young man that I met a few years ago. My kids were in high school. I was at a high school track meet. And I looked across, and while I'm waiting for my kids, I see Bill Rada. It was on my track team back in college.
Okay.
I'm catching up with Bill, and He finds out I work at Miller. He's like, oh my God, my son Mitch loves to weld.
Uh-huh.
He's running the 2 mile, and Mitch comes over still foaming at the mouth.
Right.
And he just said, I just love to weld. I love Miller Electric. And
Huh.
I'm on your website every night consuming every piece of video content I can.
That's awesome.
And I know Mitch loved to weld, and he was so passionate while he was in high school. He was taking classes at night and on
Okay.
weekends at Fox Valley Tech up in Appleton. And I wanted Mitch to understand, certainly there's opportunities, to get your hands on the weld. And then there's other things you can do as you make your decisions. So I brought Mitch over to Miller, headquarters in Appleton, introduced him to our production welders. He saw the craftsmanship, introduced him to the individuals running our welding robots in our weld lab, and finally introduced him to the welding engineers that were shaping the next generation of waveforms that he would ultimately feel, in his hands. And at the end of the day, Mitch started a small weld shop of his own, had a few people working for him, and was manufacturing trailers and other items, and really enjoys the passion of welding. And I guess the last thing I would say is, if you needed another reason to consider a career in welding, a highly skilled welder can easily earn 6 figures in this business. Without the need for a traditional college degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just in Iowa. I won't tell you the employer, but you probably could guess it. A couple weeks ago, and talking with a gentleman who was a workforce leader in that particular plant, huge plant, and so he was on the union side, kind of leading leading the union folks. But his son had taken a job as a welder in another plant. And he was just telling me the story, and he said, you wouldn't believe it. He said, first of all, obviously the education pathway is a little bit different, and in some ways, and from an economic standpoint, can be a little bit more efficient, especially if you're working while you're going to school. But he said his son was 24. He had his pickup truck 100% paid for. He had his house half paid off. Literally had 24 years. He had his own house, and he had paid off half of his mortgage. So to your point, I think, obviously we don't recommend that anybody takes a job just for the money. But if you're like Mitch and you love creativity and you love working with your hands and you like being around this technology, and by the way, for somebody like that, also have an entrepreneurial spirit and actually run your own business. I mean, it's amazing opportunities.
Mitch is a unique individual to begin with, because at that time he's in high school. He had his own sandblasting business. Yeah. He's a hard worker. And the funny part of that conversation to me, Matt, was Mitch's mom had one question for me. She said, Dave, will Mitch have good job security? And I just smiled and I said, Marnie, Mitch is going to be just fine.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And he's just fine.
Absolutely. So you mentioned as you were kind of walking through that experience with Mitch and bringing him into Miller Electric and meeting the welding operators you mentioned, and you talk about the engineers, and then you got into some of the innovation and the changing technology. All of those technology changes, Dave, are not just providing employment, but also finding ways to make that employment even more productive. So let's talk about this combination of people and productivity, and why recruiting more people into the field of welding and making sure that we're making our welding operations more productive and efficient is so important.
The reality of the kind of skills gap challenge that we have today in this space is that I don't think we'll be able to produce enough welders coming out of school to overcome, the retirements that will be happening in the years to come, right? So it really requires us to tackle this skills gap challenge on multiple fronts. Mm-hmm. No doubt, we need outreach at a young age to be able to inspire youth to the potential about a career in welding, combined with a vibrant, technical college system that's ready to receive them. Right. Absolutely. And that will help us address, again, a portion of this challenge. Mm-hmm. And then the other side of the challenge is quite simply getting the most or getting more out of the available labor that we have today. Mm-hmm. And there's a number of ways that we can do that. And I think about, from our standpoint, certainly as a welding equipment manufacturer, right? Working in that space, there's weld process enhancements that, we're bringing into the marketplace today that others in the space are bringing. Think about, regulated metal deposition or other high input processes that are necessary. Process-related changes like metal core wires that can enhance throughput are absolutely necessary. And yet, again, there's maybe only so many people that are trained on some of those processes or that are available to be able to do that. So in our space, we think about automation. I think about some of the advancements in automation, like the collaborative robotic welding, phase that if you were at FabTech in recent years, it looked maybe like a cobot show at different times, right?
Absolutely.
Things like cobots, things like handheld laser welding that we'll maybe talk about here a little bit that absolutely help address getting more productivity out of the labor that's available. And then the other side of that we have thought quite a bit about is kind of back to our core, using simplicity as a tool, to enhance productivity.
Okay.
I mentioned earlier, again, at ITW, simplicity is one of our core values, 80/20 stamped on our forehead. And that means we think about, the 20% of activities in our day that add 80% of the value. And when we apply that into the welding space, what our engineers have thought about is, how do we bring a combination of simple, intuitive user interfaces combined with some of the advancements in software capabilities in the background that allows us to get more productive, applications for welders. And I'll maybe just, wrap this thought up here by saying what that means in the welding space is, first of all, eliminating some of the feature complexity that, again, engineers love features, love to design something new, but that can get an inexperienced welder in trouble.
Interesting.
Right? So removing some of the feature complexity and keeping welders out of trouble and keeping them in the right parameters for the job to be done, keeps them more productive.
Absolutely.
You combine that with this kind of software in the background that is sampling the welding arc tens of thousands of times per second.
Wow.
And we can now dynamically control that arc to make a good welder better.
Awesome.
Or a better welder great.
Yeah.
And the combination of those things, what our industrial welding accounts is saying is that allows me to get a welder out of the lab and onto the shop floor faster.
Absolutely.
And makes them productive.
And it's almost a combination of a couple different concepts as you're talking about that, Dave. I mean, first of all, ITW and Miller Electric have been completely all in on this whole concept of 80/20, which, to kind of paraphrase, I may not get it perfect, but, 80% of our benefit is going to come from 20% of our effort, or 80% of our margin is going to come from 20% of our customers, or 80% of our productivity is going to come from 20% of our team members, and figuring out what that group of 20% is, and then leveraging that and focusing on that can create tremendous success for an organization. And so I'm hearing that not just in terms of how we would run a company, but in terms of how we think about the customer experience or the user of our product. And then you combine that with, the idea of poka-yoke or error-proofing and lean manufacturing, and saying, okay, how do we make this as error-proof as possible for the person using it, so that we can take as much judgment out of the model and make sure, and that just takes variation out of the model to get into Six Sigma and another lean concept. We could keep going. Talk a little more. You mentioned, cobots and collaborative robotics and so on. How is automation and robotics transforming the world of welding?
Well, I think you think about automation and robotics in the welding space, it's been around for a long time. And back to this notion of just productivity and getting more, from less. Robotic welding really has had a sweet spot, if you think, for a long time in maybe low mix, high volume applications where you could gain those efficiencies.
Yep.
Now, with the onset of collaborative robotic welding, it's now brought that into higher mix, low volume applications where you also have the ability to gain those efficiencies.
Right.
So now it's not just an automotive assembly line that is manufacturing frames, which has kind of been the poster child for some of that kind of automated welding, but it's into smaller job shops where they can do that, and you can move these collaborative robots around. Not to mention, you open up the window for one operator to run multiple robots and get even greater efficiencies. But what it's also doing is creating the need for additional skills or different competencies that an operator needs to be effective. And we may not need the highly skilled welding operator that we once had, but it doesn't change the need for that operator to be able to identify a good weld from a bad weld.
Sure.
And then apply that with some of the new competencies that they have.
Absolutely.
I think in some ways, and I think about those skill sets and the need for reskilling or upskilling. Matt, we were talking earlier about some of the AI related artificial intelligence work that is creeping into all of our organizations.
Yep.
So not necessarily even in a welding related capacity, but the need to upskill our workforce once again comes into question as our own teams are looking and wondering, what will the impact of AI have on my job?
Right.
Right. And, I've heard it said, for those that are concerned about that, it's not AI, right, that might take your job, but it could be another employee who's better skilled at using some of the AI tools that we might bring, that could threaten your job. And so, again, the responsibility that, we have as employers to, help upskill our teams and prepare them so that they'll be, relevant, for us in the future as well.
Yeah, no question. We talk in manufacturing as the job gets closer and closer to automation, which is what's happening in some cases. In the case of welding, you start automating a welding process. The job, number one, becomes safer in many cases. Doesn't matter whether that's welding, machining, material handling, whatever. The more automated it becomes, typically the safer the job becomes. The second thing that happens is it becomes more interesting, right? So if I'm running a group of robots, programming robots, running multiple weld cells all at the same time, a little bit more mentally challenging for me, possibly a little bit less mundane and more interesting. And the third thing is that because of the higher skill level, the job will typically pay better. So, find me somebody that doesn't want a more interesting, safer, better paying job. I don't know that there's too many people that are thinking that way. So we've got all these opportunities that are coming as a result of robotics and collaborative robots. And I don't want to let your point get missed in the mix either. This whole idea of, automating an automotive assembly line where I'm making the same frame or the same body day after day after day, part after part. I'm not going to say that's easy to automate, but when the robot is going to exactly the same place 40 million times a year or whatever the number is, that is a much easier process to automate than when I'm running a shop like one of the facilities I ran where we literally had 16,000 different SKUs that we ran, so 16,000 different parts. And so now with the advent of collaborative robotics, vision systems, and so on, we're now in a position to be able to automate much smaller lots of parts, which make automation much more accessible to a lot of employers. And as the world automates, as we automate welding processes and fabrication processes and so on, all kinds of opportunities for employees. I think, one of the things that when we think about the people working in whether it's metal fabrication or any other aspect of manufacturing, Dave, one of the things I always tried to do was connect them not just to the process that they're running, not just to the activity of welding two pieces of metal together to create a fixture or to create a fabricated part, but also where's that part going or how does it fit into the greater picture. So tell me about that. If I'm somebody that's running a metal fabrication operation, if I'm somebody that's running an organization like Miller Electric, what are some of the ways that employers should be thinking about how they connect their team members to the actual end use parts that they're working on? Is that important?
I love that notion, Matt. And I think the reality is, if I think about someone that we've just hired at Miller Electric and they, are helping us to produce a welding machine, wherever that welding machine is going, depending on their life experiences, what exposure they've had to welding, they may have no idea other than they're putting together a blue box that is going out the end of our assembly line, right? Yep. And I think regardless of the product that you make or that you are welding within your shop, an engaged team is going to be a more successful team, right? Sure. And I think about our own organization. I want our entire team to be able to make a passionate connection, not only to the mission of Miller Electric, but to the mission of our customers. We do that in a number of ways. Recently, we had town hall meetings across our entire campus. Okay. Maybe 8 of those different meetings, a couple hundred people at a time. Yes, we gave company updates. We talked about the financials. We talked about the safety, culture. But we spent a good portion of our time kind of illuminating for them where our products are going. Sure. What it is, that they're doing. And if I can help you understand that when you do your job to the very best of your ability, you're not just shipping another blue box, right? But you're actually contributing to someone who may be manufacturing a car to transport people safely. Right. You're building buildings, right? You're manufacturing ships, rail cars, trailers, spacecraft. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
Yep.
And I am convinced, that you will think differently about your role and the pride that you feel in the job that you're doing if you understand those things better.
Absolutely.
And I firmly believe that our customers benefit from that
For sure.
every day.
Yep.
And that's part of what I mentioned earlier, the culture and the passion that you would feel if you're engaging with our people on the floor. It's because we want them to understand this is actually what you're doing.
Absolutely.
You're not just, assembling a blue box.
For sure.
That blue box does a lot of things in the marketplace.
Absolutely. My years of manufacturing, I used to, one of the mantras that we had is that most people don't want to go into work and do a bad job, right?
Right.
I mean, there's some people that maybe just don't care.
I will assume positive intent there.
Exactly. Yeah. The vast majority of people, and I can just tell you from 25 years in manufacturing and working around the amazing people that work in the plants and factories across America, very, very few of those people want to do a bad job. But helping them connect to what does a good job mean? And when you start thinking about, look, the quality of the product that you're putting out here could mean the difference in the quality of an automobile, could mean the difference in the quality of a spacecraft. It could be, it could be or just the experience of a customer. Anybody that's ever received something, a product that had a defect or a flaw in it knows the frustration that can come along with that. And the flip side is also true. Having something that works perfectly out of the box can create that brand loyalty on the part of the customer and really does make a difference for all kinds of different folks. And I think it's one of the beauties of being in the manufacturing space is just the number of different ways that we can touch the overall economy.
You think about the brand equity that what goes into brand equity for any given brand, right? It's so many touch points, from the way they receive the product out of the box, the way it functions, the way they engage our customer service teams, the way they engage our sales teams and whatnot. And I think we've shared a great deal of that as well with this team, that whatever your role is in the organization, you have an opportunity and you are influencing how customers think about our brand every day.
Absolutely.
And I need for them to understand that the customer experience vision starts with, the person to the right of you on the assembly line is your first customer.
Yep.
Right? Our warehouse, the next customer, our distributors, the next customer, the end customer. There's, the customer chain is deep and full of expectations that, we're ready to meet.
And the strength of every single one of those links is the ultimate, magic sauce, if you will, or secret sauce in manufacturing to producing a quality product. It's everything from sourcing great materials, having a great supply chain, having reliable team members, having quality built into the process, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's final inspection, and to your point, distribution and logistics and so on, and also an element of innovation, right? And certainly your brand is one that, as we've talked about, when people think about Miller Electric, they think about quality products, they think about quality outcomes, and they think about advancements in innovation. Let's touch on this a little bit. Part of the reason that you're in the neighborhood today is because of your Milwaukee Tech Innovation Hub, which is probably, just for our listeners' benefit, maybe 20, 25 minutes away from the studio we're sitting in now. Tell us a little bit about what that endeavor is going.
About 18 months ago, Matt, we opened this tech center, and I would start with the backdrop of, again, Miller Electric, headquartered in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Fox Valley.
Right.
I'm born and raised there. It's a great place to raise a family, good access to culture, to arts, to a workforce that just has a tremendous work ethic, a backdrop of kind of a coalition of nonprofits and industry, folks like Miller Electric that really believe in the quality of life where we live and work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The reality is, however, if you grow up in a large metro area, it's a bit of a culture shock if you're moving to Appleton, Wisconsin.
Absolutely.
And I think what we found is we were looking for certain high demand skill sets, software engineers, power electronics of the world, that getting them to move to Appleton, Wisconsin was getting a little bit more difficult. So we had to be creative in how we thought about that. So we looked at several different markets, and Milwaukee, for a number of reasons, was a great place for us to open this technology center. Day 2, after opening that center, I think we had a software engineer from New York accept that job.
Wow.
They were going to move to Milwaukee. They weren't moving to Appleton.
Interesting.
And the reality is now, we have a growing staff there of a variety of disciplines that are now 80 miles, an easy day trip from our labs from the rest of our technical team, easy assimilation into our culture,
Yep.
that are actively working on projects across the portfolio. It's been a wonderful investment for the organization and a growing investment in a vibrant area that has great technical schools. MSOE is right around the corner.
Right.
Other employers with skill sets in this market that we desire is allowing us to become an employer of choice now in this market as well.
Sure, and a little bit more of an urban or a city type environment for somebody who's attracted to that, and certainly you've got downtown Milwaukee, the Third Ward.
It's in the
Lake
great
Michigan,
Third Ward district, Schlitz Park. There might be a beer garden on occasion.
Yep.
It's
not that anybody would go there.
Not that anyone would go to that, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so let's chat about this, and credit to you, by the way, in Miller Electric for this creative way of looking at the workforce and recognizing what might be attractive or interesting to potential employees, and then flexing and being flexible as the world of work changes, and finding ways to recruit the kinds of people that you need to continue to grow your organization. I can attest to the differences in culture. I'm a suburban Milwaukee guy. Grew up just outside of Milwaukee, but for 7 years of my life, I was actually CEO of a company in Chilton, Wisconsin, which our listeners can look it up on the map. Most of them won't know where that is, but it's right around Lake Winnebago, pretty much, and a little bit south from Appleton. There is a culture difference between that area and a more urban area like Milwaukee. I'll tell you, one of the other differences that I learned about when I was there was the difference between our male welders and our female welders, and we actually had a number of women that were engaged in the welding profession that worked in that organization. And I'll say it so you don't have to, not to stereotype, but in terms of fine motor skills, patience, accuracy. Boy, if you could find a woman who wanted to be a welder, that was somebody that was worth their weight in gold in manufacturing. Do you hear the same thing, and why is that?
We see it.
Yeah.
And we've seen it in a number of ways. Obviously, it's been exciting to see in recent years. I'll even look into the kind of welding technical schools, and the increase in females in those programs has been significant, right? We've had tremendous success with females in our weld training roles, our field selling roles, and I see that through our welding engineering classes, our sales engineering intern classes rather, that women are doing fantastic. And to your point, if you think about, what is it that makes a good welder? You mentioned some of those things, right? Or let's say at least gives you better chance for success, right? Those fine motor skills, women do tend to excel in some of those areas. And what I have found interesting as well is if I think about some of the female interns that we've had in our welding engineering interns or sales interns, I don't know that any of them ever, grew up dreaming of being a welder. I'm not sure that that's the case, but they have stumbled on welding, in some capacity. I think of one of the interns who was going down a veterinary science path. CC was going down an agricultural path and was exposed to welding, and literally kind of the spark was lit. And they have brought their skill sets in a really successful fashion. And if we think about the impact of women in welding in the next 10 years, I think it's going to be significant.
Absolutely.
It's going to be significant.
And you mentioned the importance of training as well. So we've got women working in the engineering field. We have women working, in the manufacturing floors, the advanced manufacturing floors of America in the welding profession, and also women training and upskilling the next generation of welders. And there aren't enough of them doing that just yet. But the ones that are, I've just met some amazing women who are working as instructors or, high school tech ed teachers that are inspiring students around this technology. It's really, really amazing.
Athena, Stephanie, and others on our training teams are doing an amazing job. And they have the experience, the skill set, the interpersonal skills that all gives them the credibility in any room, to help us, kind of upskill the next generation.
And in terms of upskilling that next generation, in terms of inspiring people more and more toward welding technology and careers in welding, you've got some really interesting solutions, especially for whether it's middle school, high school, technical college, leveraging technology and leveraging that student experience in a way that maybe isn't quite as intimidating than putting them right into a weld booth. Tell us about that.
As we've thought about how can we come alongside industry, come alongside our technical school network. Our suite of training solutions, if you will, is really built around a premise of outreach, assessment, and then enablement, Matt.
Okay.
And if I kind of take those in order, you mentioned some of the unique things. So that from an outreach standpoint, we've had available now for a couple of years this fun little tool, if you will. It's called a mobile arc. You've got one here in your lab, I saw. And that is a tool at a very affordable price point, literally in a cell phone size package.
Right.
That I love to see our technical colleges and others taking into middle schools, getting the welding process, the feel for that in front of young folks that gives them a chance to think differently, perhaps before their mind is made up on something else.
For sure.
That outreach is going to be so critical, as we talked earlier. Now, as I think about the assessment side of the world, our augmented arc system is very often used for just that. I think about here even recently, shipyards, for example, that need hundreds and hundreds of skilled welders to do the work that they have in front of them to support, our Navy and other applications.
Right.
Shipyard here recently brought in 20 to 25 augmented arc systems, and they're literally bringing people off the street.
Okay.
And this is their first pass.
Huh.
They need skilled trades of all kinds, but they're going to have you take this augmented arc test, if you will, to see whether they believe you have the raw material, some of those skills that we talked about,
right,
to be a welder. And if you do, they'll move you to the next phase. If not, they have other trades that they will move you into, right? A fantastic use of a tool like that.
For sure.
And then finally, the kind of the enablement side is, where we would position our live arc system, which does still have some simulated welding, but then transitions you to striking a live arc and is kind of the last step to move you from the lab into the out onto the shop floor. The combination of those things have been, really powerful tools. And then maybe the last piece is we're really proud of open book curriculum that
which is free, by the way,
is free. And part of, I think, what we felt a responsibility we had to support welding instructors and give them an opportunity to spend more time in the lab and less time developing curriculum.
I love that. We talk about, if you think about the top three, whatever your education pathway was, teachers, instructors, professors, whatever, almost every one of us, I certainly can point to like three of those individuals who had a profound influence on our life. And maybe they showed us that we had a skill that we didn't know we had, or a gift that we didn't know we had, or an interest that we didn't know we had, and opened up our eyes to something we never would have done if not for that particular teacher, professor, or instructor. And it was never the one that spent the most time figuring out how to develop the best curriculum, right?
Exactly.
It was the one
that was spending time with you personally.
Got it, exactly. And so the whole concept of open book, and again, it's it's available and it's free for anybody that wants access to it, is that whole idea. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's leverage every single moment that a teacher, a professor, or an instructor can spend with that student, and then create these really technology-driven experiences for the student, whether it's going into a middle school and showing a student that maybe didn't even know welding could be a career in a really unintimidating fashion, right? Just basically putting on a helmet or using something that looks like a smartphone and get experience around welding technology.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. So all these really, really cool educational solutions. I want to make sure that we give you an opportunity to highlight this partnership that you've got with APT and with FANUC, both companies that we know well. So talk a little bit about ModWeld and that partnership.
What Tony and the team at APT has done with the ModWeld system, again, taking some of the technology from FANUC, from Miller, and now bringing the flexibility in the machining capabilities that Tony has in his integration capability,
right,
to be able to bring a collaborative robot into it, certainly within education. And he's done a really nice job creating cells that can get into tech schools and give students introduction into what you can do with a collaborative robot, but also providing the flexibility within that modular welding system,
right,
to be able to adapt it, to the needs that you have within your space. And Tony's now into that. Probably coming up on 2 years, maybe,
Yeah.
in terms of that space. And he's got a nice footprint across gas and welding distributors, getting that APT mod weld system in there. And we've been, really proud to work in support of that system.
Absolutely. And I'll just plug a couple things. I know there's a huge event going on in Minneapolis here in a few short weeks, I think toward the end of September, where the mod weld solution, of course, featuring Miller's technology, is going to be on offer and presented. And so I would recommend, we'll link that up in the show notes. Any of our listeners who just heard that amazing explanation from Dave on this really, really cool technology, modular collaborative robotics, bringing together the best in welding technology, the best in robotics technology. So we'd love to see as many people heading over to that event as we possibly can, because it really is transformative technology, and we're really doing some cool stuff in terms of exposing people to that technology. And when we use the words mod weld, it really is modular. I mean, it's and Tony's been really, really innovative in the way that he has set that up, creating all these really cool relationships he has, you have, Fanuc has, between education and industry. I know you've got some partnerships that you want to highlight here, Dave, and you're doing some cool and innovative things. So who should we be giving credit to in terms of the relationships that you've created?
There's a lot of relationships, out into the marketplace. If I think about the role that we have as a manufacturer to support, I think the coalitions that happen, maybe locally, regionally, right? So to name a few of those, might be difficult, but I do want to highlight when I think about, some of the work that certainly back to Tony's solution and carrying that into education, it does make me think about local relationships and some of the coalitions that I think we all need to pay attention to. And maybe an example that comes to mind for me, you mentioned Chilton,
right,
Wisconsin earlier. So a neighbor of Chilton is Kiel, Wisconsin,
for sure.
Right? So in Kiel, Wisconsin, a few years ago, I had a call from Mike Vanderzanden, the president of Ameriquip.
Okay.
So local,
know the company well,
local manufacturer,
absolutely.
right? And Mike sat on the board of Lakeshore Technical College, which is one of the local universities that we've been a strong supporter of for years. In his backyard, you have Kiel High School had a welding lab that was in need of some support at the time. And through Mike's leadership, our support, and I would say through the open minds of administration at Lakeshore Tech and Kiel High School updated their welding program to get dual accreditation with Lakeshore Tech, where both now Kiel High School and Lakeshore Tech, keenly aware of the welding processes and needs of a local manufacturer, was producing, work-ready, welders that have been really successful within Mike's Ameriquip operation. And I think, to me, I could go on and on about those kinds of relationships maybe that we have across the country, but it's just a great example of the type of thinking and the type of coalitions that need to happen in communities all across North America for us to really kind of get after this problem.
Absolutely. You think about, and we know a lot of the players there. We certainly know the folks at Kiel well. I know the folks at Ameriquip well, and folks like Paul Carlson, who's now leading Lakeshore Technical College, Rachel Krepline, who's the dean, and then Dave Saunders, I believe, is the program director for their welding program, who I've known Dave since my days in Chilton, actually, because I recruited his students to come and work at our manufacturing plant. Just amazing partnerships, and it really speaks to when we create these whether it's stackable credentials, whether it's credits that students can earn while they're in high school and take them on to a technical community college. The importance of everybody being at the table, whether it's the manufacturer of the equipment, the employer who's hiring these students, the educators who are preparing the next generation of the workforce, and we bring all those people together. It's unbelievable the opportunities that we can create for students to enter the world of manufacturing, hopefully at an employer that's going to take really, really good care of them. I know that you're huge on culture and huge on figuring out how employers in the metal fabrication space can become an employer of choice and the kind of organization that people want to go to work for or work in. You've got tremendous experience doing that. Obviously, an organization that's coming up here on 95 years in business isn't going to get there without employing and attracting great talent. So what advice do you have for employers that are trying to figure out that model?
I would say, maybe two things here. On the one hand, for just employers in general, we talked about this, earlier, in engaged teams, right? We share a lot of information about our business
Mm-hmm.
with our teams.
Yep.
It's just not acceptable to kind of check your brain at the door.
Right.
We need everyone to help us run the successful North American, manufacturing business.
Absolutely.
So share lots of information,
Yep.
Light the fire, at the lowest level possible so they can help you make good decisions. And as it relates to the welding space, for welding fabricators that are looking to differentiate themselves, I think about the fact that scarce welding workforce has choices in most communities in terms of where they want to work, right? Some of those choices are the typical things, it's the company culture, it's compensation, benefits, things of that nature.
Right.
But for a welder, it's also the welding environment that they're going to operate in, right? And so I think an organization that carries their proactive safety culture maybe into the investments that they're willing to make in weld fume mitigation, weld fume management, you have an opportunity to create an environment for your welders that will differentiate you as an employer of choice in the marketplace. We've worked hard over the years at developing a welding health and safety portfolio that certainly can help employers meet OSHA or ACGIH, the industrial hygiene requirements that are there. Where those regulatory pressures don't exist, it's still a suite of solutions, that can help you differentiate yourself and make you an attractive place for someone that would want to work.
Yeah, you think about the imbalance that we've had between the availability of welding talent and the number of companies that are looking for great welders and great people that understand this technology. The benefit has certainly gone to the employee, if you will, and I think it will continue for time to come, regardless of what happens in the economy. You were made the point earlier, we're probably never going to be able to fill all the positions that are open. So as an employer, you're literally competing for talent. And, if an individual has a choice of 5 or 6 different local employers in which they can work, and they're walking into a facility, and one of them is, the old cliche, dark, dirty, and dangerous,
That's
or
right.
It doesn't smell clean, it doesn't look clean, it doesn't look safe, it's not the kind of environment you want to work in every day. And then the other one is technology driven, has in some cases maybe automation, it's clean, it's well cared for, it looks like a safe environment. All things being equal, which one are you going to pick? And so you think about being an employer of choice and creating an attractive environment. It's more than just the compensation and benefits. In fact, you look at most lists of employee priorities, and those are like numbers 4 or 5, and there's a lot of things that come ahead of that. So I think you did a great job of highlighting those.
People have choices.
Yep, exactly. It's well put. In a few words, people have choices. Now, I want to just wrap up our time here with Dave Lambert with one final question. You gave some great advice to employers that are looking to employ really top-notch talent in the field of welding. I'd love for you to give some advice to yourself. I'd love for you to go back in time. I mean, you're one of the few people that gets to grow up in the shadow of just an iconic brand like Miller Electric, and find a way to be able to lead the organization in the way that you are. You've got to feel incredibly blessed to have that opportunity, I would think. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if you could go back in time, to that young man that's growing up in that neighborhood, not too far from the manufacturing operation, the business that you now get to run, Dave, and you could give that 15-year-old kid, let's assume you're 15 years old, maybe just getting started your sophomore year of high school, and you could give that young man one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think the first piece of advice I would give would be to enjoy that mullet, because that too shall pass.
Yeah, for both of us, as it
I think,
turns out.
Well, they may not be able to see us, as you can see. Those days are long past. But
in my case, by the way, it was the flock of seagulls hairdo. I don't know if you remember that one.
I totally do.
Absolutely,
yes.
I had that one going on.
Flock of seagulls, Brian Setzer, Stray Cat. It was all of it, and it was glorious at the time.
It was at the time.
No, I would say, Matt, if I think about, given the experience I've had now, and what advice would I give my 15-year-old self, it would be to be curious. I think to seek and find experiences to expand my horizons as a young man that only come when you have the power of perspective, right? To compare one experience to another. If I think about my 27 years now with this organization,
wow, yeah,
that's the opportunity that I've had within this company. I am an ex-bean counter.
Yep. As am I, by the way.
As am you, that now has the opportunity to lead our shared services organizations, including our sales and marketing teams in the Americas. And I'm certain that some in my organization would say, as I'm in my 11th role with the organization, maybe that suggests that I can't keep a job for longer than 2.5 years.
You're staying in the same company, right?
But I've been in the same company. But I was given that opportunity, right, to act on my curiosity and to allow my curiosity to guide my career path, you know, in a very non-traditional way through this company. And I think, you know, that perspective, even at an earlier age, would have benefited me really well.
Absolutely.
As a young man.
You know, we just, as an organization, the Tech Ed Media Group, as you know, just released a report on the state of AI in the state of Wisconsin. And one of the questions that was asked in that report, and we'll link it up in the show notes, by the way, for anybody who wants access to that report, because it was fascinating, the results. But we interviewed employers across the state, and we said, you know, what are those personality traits that are most important as people consider careers in AI, or what are the personality traits you look for in your people to lead your AI journey? Number one on the list was curiosity, believe it or not, and just a perfect answer.
It's the advice that I would give anyone, and as I get asked that question from maybe interns or folks that are new with us in the organization, 27 years, you know, first of all, like, how do you do it? Why do you stay with a company that long? Number one, that's culture.
Right.
And then what are the kind of keys to success? And I think it's curiosity. And then, you know, what I love about our organization, it's the ability to practice humble leadership and know that I don't know everything there is to know about sales or marketing, but I'm willing to ask the question and let my team help me make those answers. And that's what's been fun and exciting, you know, about the organization as well.
Yeah, culture, curiosity, and that whole idea of servant leadership and being humble and recognizing that as leaders, and it took me a long time to get there myself, and in my days of manufacturing leadership, is realize that your job first and foremost is to serve other people, serve your team members, serve your customers, serve all your stakeholders. And when you put that idea first, as clearly you have, Dave, throughout your career, it's amazing what can happen. It's amazing what happened with you now running this incredible organization and helping to lead ITW Welding, better known, as we suggest, as Miller Electric, as its group vice president. I want to thank Dave Lambert for joining us here on the Tech Ed Podcast. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Matt. Really appreciate it.
What a great conversation we had with Dave Lambert, the Group Vice President of ITW Welding / Miller Electric. We talked about things like curriculum. We talked about things like welding products. All these great things are going to be linked up in the show notes, so you can take a look there. As everybody knows, we have the absolute best show notes in the business. You can find those show notes at techedpodcast.com/Lambert. That is techedpodcast.com/Lambert. So be sure to check out the show notes and be sure to check us out on social media. Until next week, my name is Matt Kirkner. I am the host of the Tech Ed Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.